welcome to my new blog post 23. And in this blog post, I'm going to discuss about uh, a TSQL as a dialect to understand. Now, what does that mean? Let's start. So before moving on towards the next slide, I really would like to give you some aspects about the TSQL. Basically, TSQL is based on a strong mathematical foundations, and understanding some of the key principles from those foundations can actually help you better to understand the language you are dealing with. Then you will think in TSQL terms when coding in TSQL as opposed to coding with TSQL while thinking in procedural terms. So why I am saying this, let's understand this with uh, an example. So basically, TSQL is the main language and used to manage and manipulate data in Microsoft main relational database management system, which is RDBMS. SQL Server, whether it's on premises or actually it's in the cloud, like Microsoft Windows Azure SQL database. SQL servers also supports other languages like Microsoft Visual C Sharp and Microsoft Visual Basics, but TSQL is usually the preferred language for the data management and manipulation. Then how this TSQL is actually came into the being? This is the big question. So let's see how the TSQL is actually evolved for the Microsoft. So basically, TSQL utilizes two basic components uh, of the workflows. Uh, First one is the set theory, which is the basic set theory that we normally read and write in our mathematics exams. And then there's predicate logic. Now, when you combine predicate logic with the set theory, you will get a relational model. Uh, and this relational model basically gives you the basics of the SQL. This is not the Microsoft SQL. This is the standard SQL. Now, this SQL is basically a standard which is set by ISO, which is International Organization for Standards, and the American National Standards Institute. So this SQL have is actually used to drive uh, the TSQL. The TSQL is basically the dialect of SQL, which is provided by Microsoft. So we can say that, like, if I am talking about Oracle, Oracle is also utilizing the SQL. So the SQL for the Oracle is actually like it will have some its own components, its own functions, and it's a separate direct with respect to Oracle. But it will obviously have to inherit the standard ISO or the ANSI SQL. These two standards for SQL are basically the same. The SQL standards keep evolving with the time, and there are major revisions for this standards, namely to name few: SQL 86, 89, SQL 92, SQL 1999, SQL 2006, SQL 2008, and SQL 2011, and many more, which are actually coming up. These standard features actually of SQL are normally inherited by various vendors, like for example, Microsoft. And then these features are actually provided in TSQL along with the new features which are actually written by Microsoft or any other or any database vendor, right? So normally I can say this, like all leading database vendors, including Microsoft, implement a dialect of SQL as the main language to manage and manipulate data in their database platforms. Therefore, the core language element look the same. However, each vendor decides, for example, Oracle or Microsoft, which features to implement and which they don't want to implement. Mainly, most of the time, all of these features are actually provided. Few are not provided. Also, the standards sometimes leave some aspects as an implementation choice. Each vendor also usually implements extensions to the standards in case where the vendor feels that it's important that feature isn't covered by the standard in itself. So normally it is highly recommended that you need to write your code in a standard way. When you do so, your code is actually more portable. For example, if you write a code in SQL, normal SQL, that code will also run on Oracle as well as on Microsoft. And this makes your knowledge more portable too, because it's easy for you to start working with new platforms. When we talk about the dialect, you are working with the supports both standard and in a non-standard way to do something. You should always uh, prefer the standard form as your default choice. You should consider a non-standard option as well, only when it has some important benefit to you that is not covered by the standard alternative. For example, if Microsoft is providing a very good feature which is actually not available in SQL, standard SQL, then you need to go for the Microsoft SQL. And in many ways you have to. So this is all about like how the SQL is evolved. I'm in further topics. I'm going to talk about relational model, and when I talk about relational model, I mean set theory and predicate logic.